So I went ahead and hit the record button. So this is one of those podcasts where I have no context on somebody, and like I'm starting from scratch. So I don't even like know what to jump into. We were talking about teaching and being a speech language pathologist, and you had explained something different that just the swallowing thing, like that people don't understand that like some of these mechanisms of, I don't know, is it the throat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think a lot of speech, I would say the community or just people in general don't really know everything that a speech language pathologist does. So the first thing they might think is, oh, I had therapy when I was a kid for my R's. And that's one thing we do. But, our scope of practice is fairly large, which I think is great because we have, as speech pathologists, we have a lot of different avenues to practice. At the same time, I think it's important that we specialize in an area, So I've been practicing for 20 years. It's hard to believe when you say that. It's like, I can't believe that I'm that old, and I love the field as much today as I did when I started.
Has it evolved with technology the same as anything? Like, has it, especially in the now, I would imagine any sort of healthcare field, that the changes have been rapid? Or
yeah, I think in most medical fields we are still 5 to 10 years behind the research. So it takes a while for that research to trickle down, but there's been a push, I would say, in allied health in general towards evidence-based practice and taking a look at what is in the research, but then also looking at the client perspectives and then your clinical practice perspectives to make more informed decisions for your clients, which I think is a really excellent push. I think something else that's changing in all the fields and is really great is that interprofessional practice, that idea that we're all in this together. And I think that also translates well to the schools. SLPs work in the schools, and for a long time, I think SLPs were kind of this island to themselves. But over that, I would say the last 10 to 15 years, more SLPs are working with teachers, working with parents, and taking a more holistic approach to a child and either their learning difference, disorder, or disability. And that's really exciting to me. I love that. I love working together as a team to benefit the clients that I work with.
Yeah, that's cool. And I'm going to do my little kick over here to say this will probably be a conversation that benefits you all, too. Episode number 45 of the WTF Carbondale podcast, where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives and tie it all back together to this little old place we call home, Carbondale, Illinois. My guest, Erin Connelly, is part of this, I guess, as I've said, impromptu series featuring some District 95 school board candidates. So school is your life.
Yeah.
You talked about you were talking about research, kind of leading practice, right, by a period of time in the world of being a schooling professional. I was trying to figure out which words I was going to go with. I was like, is it pedagogy? Is it professing? Is it which direction? But do you do a mix of clinical activity, teaching, and research? Do you do all three?
So I am non-tenure track faculty at SIU, and I am a associate professor of practice. So I am teaching clinical education primarily. So we have a clinic, the Clinical Center at SIU, that offers counseling services, psychological services, and also speech language therapy services. And so I supervise graduate clinicians and help them to develop their clinical skills. But I also teach some didactic courses. So this is my first year teaching an undergrad class, and it's been really fun. I'm teaching speech and hearing science, which is a big topic, and it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I moving into teaching, so this has been my 4th year teaching at SIU, and I would say, how you said you're in all things teaching. With my kids, remote learning. So I've got 3 kids remote learning. It's been a challenge, and then I had to transition to remote learning, teaching remote learning, and then I'm also working on my PhD, so I'm a student remote learning. So I think 2020 was a challenge for my family for sure.
Oh my gosh. That is an interesting perspective to have on remote learning, to have to parent through it, teach through it, and learn through it. Who do you think has it? What angle do you think has it best or worst right now? I don't even know which direction to go in that.
Yeah.
But
I think in my experience, my 6-year-old, it's been very difficult for her. She is super gregarious. She's outgoing. She loves people, but she also has social anxiety. And so here she is trapped in this house with her family, and she's bored, sick and tired of us. She wants to talk to other people, but she just couldn't get her mind around remote learning. It triggered that social anxiety in her, and being on those, Google Meets was just too much for her.
yeah.
So we ended up pulling her from school and homeschooling her, which didn't work out all that well either, I would say. Until now, we've re-enrolled her now that they're back. So she's back in school, and she's loving it. She's more willing to do the remote piece on Wednesdays, I think, now, because she has that personal relationship with her teacher, so it's really hit her hard. Jameson, my 11-year-old, he is at Lewis. He's in 5th grade, and he's kind of my easy-go-lucky kind of kid, and he's doing great. His teacher, Mrs. Jenkins, is amazing. I can't even begin to describe how creative she is in her teaching methods. They go on virtual field trips, and Jameson will be so excited. I'm like, Mom, tomorrow we're going on a virtual field trip here, and we're going to get to see this, and we're going to get to see that. And the way that she's used PowerPoint presentations with the kids, creating their own presentations, it's really unique, and he's learning. He is learning. And so that's great. My eldest son, Owen, he's a teenager. He's freshman year in high school, and it's just kind of a sad way to start out high school, and he's an introvert anyways. He's a musician, and he misses band so much, like just this big hole in his heart, where band is. So I think he is also pretty impacted by this, and I've talked to other friends that have teenagers, trying to just get them out of their room. It's just a challenge. Yeah. So, and then I think for myself, and I imagine that the teachers in the district feel this way also. Like, now the university has lifted some of the restrictions, and so we're allowed to our clients are starting to come back. We've been doing teletherapy, which I'd never done before. Just had to step into teletherapy, and not only step into it and do it myself, but step into it and teach my students how to do it at the same time that I was learning it. So we have clients coming back, and I got to see one of my clients for the first time in a year almost, and it's so exciting. I just want to I want to hug my students. They're like, oh, it's just so good to see you in person.
Yeah.
I heard this. I was listening to NPR, and I heard this really interesting statement about how Zoom is great, but at the same time, we lack that interpersonal experience, and we can hide really easily in Zoom. And I realize, you know, now and being able to be with my students a little more, gosh, how much I missed it.
Yeah.
You know?
The kids going back to school thing, I can't imagine, and we've talked about this both in Kathy and Corey's, the importance of grandparents and being able to manage through this, right? And to imagine what it would be like to not have these support systems in place that have even allowed this to occur. Do you and Sean have a similar support system? Like, is there family around here for you guys, or?
Well, my mom and dad are here, but Sean's mother passed away during COVID. She was elderly, and she passed away in the nursing home, which was really hard because we weren't really able to see her. And my mom and dad are also older. They're in their mid to late 80s. So they love our kids and they spend time with them, but they can't take care of them, you know? So, yeah, I am home Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sean is home Tuesday, Thursday. And that's how we've made it work.
Wow.
It's hard. And working parents, it's hard, you know. And I will give, I think, you know, a lot of credit to District 95 in that I have felt supported as a parent. I was, you know, nervous about pulling Reagan out, but when I talked to the principal about it, she understood, you know. And then when it was when I wanted to bring Reagan back, you know, I was kind of embarrassed, you know, because I had all these good intentions, but I didn't get as far with Reagan as I wanted.
Yeah.
And again, the principal was just, let's just bring her back. We'll test her, we'll see where she is, and we'll move forward, you know. And they're really meeting Reagan where she is. And it's exciting for me to see that excitement for learning happen again with her. And I knew it would happen if I just kind of gave her space, you know? And so just before I came here, she was writing. She was asking me how to spell, you know, words. And she was writing these cute little stories. And it was fun to see that happen because just even, you know, 3 months ago, it was a challenge to get her to even want to pick up a pencil. And so, you know, her teacher, Mrs. Johns, and the other support teachers that are meeting with Reagan on a daily basis are a huge part of that, you know. And I think that's one of the reasons why I want to run, why I am running for school board, is because I love our community. I've lived here 16 years. My parents retired here in the 90s. I think when I was I think maybe 95, they retired here. My dad's from Anna. And so I didn't grow up here. But I met my husband when I was visiting my parents. My mom and my husband's boss at the time were friends, and they set us up on a blind date. I was living in LA. I was very angry. He was angry. Neither one of us wanted to meet each other. And you know, we met, I moved here 6 months later. 6 months later, we were married. So, and 16 years later, at the end of April, we'll have our 16th anniversary. So it worked out. And I've grown. I used to be a big city girl. And now I think about maybe 5 or 6 years into living here in Carbondale, I went to visit Chicago and I expected to feel like excitement, you know, and I felt claustrophobic, and it was such an odd feeling to me. And I realized that I had really become almost like a small town kind of girl, you know. And so back to the school board thing, I kind of got off topic there, but I love District 95. You know, we choose to be in District 95. And I love promoting our school district. I love talking to people about the teachers and my children's experience in 95 and why I think it's important that my children are in 95. And I want to serve the community. So I thought, what better way to serve the community of Carbondale than to serve the school district that, you know, I've been a mom in the district for almost 10 years, and I've got a little girl who's in first grade. So I'm going to be in the district for a long time. And, you know, I think I've said in some of the forums, I don't have a particular platform. I'm not running to change this or that. Yeah. You know, I'm really running with a heart to serve, with a love for the community, with a love for the kids, with a respect and love for the teachers, to hopefully do good and make our district stronger.
Well, and it's a tough thing. Any sort of political action that an individual takes, right? We've been pigeonholed in this idea that we have to have a platform, right? You have to come out with all these ideas to this, that, the other. And the reality is, in a lot of instances, people should just be wanting and willing to do the work and say, I want to do the work. We'll find out what these objectives are along the way. Obviously, there are objectives already in place as I come in. Right. There'll be new ones that come as life and activity develop. But, you know, my pledge here is to do the job and do it well. It's not necessarily to come in here and shake up the system one way or the other. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's important to talk about, you know, what is my, you know, background or framework, or, you know, how have my lived experiences impacting how I'm going to kind of digest a topic and, you know, understand it and then put forth my opinion. And I think in thinking about me and the type of person I am, one thing I think both my husband, Sean, and I, you know, we have friends from all different walks of life. Mm-hmm. You know, we have friends that think very differently than we do, but we're friends. Mm-hmm. You know, I respect other people's opinions and beliefs, and I find that I can learn a lot from someone else, and then I, at the same time, can respectfully disagree with someone, you know? And it seems like that art of being able to have a conversation about a topic, find where we meet, and then be respectful where we don't. In so many circles, it seems to have been lost. But maybe not. Maybe it's just that's what we're always hearing, you know, from the media, at least it seems, you know. And so I think as a school board member, you'll find that I will be open, willing to think. I like to think critically. I like to look at things from different angles. I like to do some research. Let's take a look and see, you know, how has this been approached in other ways? You know, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. There are other people that have come before us that have done this work, and so we can take a look at, you know, what they've done and then take what we think will work for our district. And I loved, like I said before, as far as, you know, my work in the past, I think if you were to talk to any of the professionals that I've worked with in the past, they will tell you that that I love that interprofessional communication, and I'll bring that to the board. I love to work as a team. I don't think that there's any better way than to work as a team together moving forward.
Where's that come from? Like for you specifically, like where does that want to be on a team and like really engage in the process? Like where does that find its roots?
You know, I really think that I found as a professional working as a speech pathologist and seeing how my patients were progressing. I worked in long-term care for a long time, so worked with the elderly and with PT and OT, but a lot of times we were just doing our own thing, you know, and starting to see how I could come alongside the physical therapist, or I could come alongside the occupational therapist, and I could help with the communication piece. I could help with the patient learning whatever strategies they needed. Like if they broke their hip and they're non-weight bearing and they keep forgetting, they keep standing up on it. You know, I can help with that. So, and then realizing when we started working together as a team, the patient outcomes were so much greater that then it almost just became a part of who I was, where I was, you know, reaching out to the skilled nursing, the CNAs, reaching out to them, reaching out to dietary, and it was, you know, funny. Sometimes I would have the CNAs come up to me and they'd say, you're not all the people in the rehab team work, but you're a worker. You work hard, you know, because I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and do what needs to be done. So if that's helping someone to the bathroom, if that's getting someone a glass of water, if that's getting somebody a pillow, you know, that's not beneath me. That kind of patient care. And so I think that idea of just rolling up my sleeves and where do you need me?
Yeah.
How can I help? Where will my skills and my skill sets be used best? I think I'll be a great addition to the board. I also am very passionate about disability, and I think that our disabled in America are very marginalized, almost to the point where a lot of times we don't even think about them. If you look at the state of the American nursing home, case in point, you know, it's not very good, and I think that happens with our kids too. And so if I could, you know, after I just said I don't have a platform, but if I could say that I had any kind of platform, it would just be to help to raise awareness and be a, you know, a voice or a champion for those kids, because, you know, they need a voice, you know.
Well, and that's pertinent now as well. If I don't have a ton of insight on school board activity, but the district was looking or has done or had some sort of task force related to bringing in services that they had otherwise had occurring at at a regional school district. Am I right on that? Okay.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know all the details, but I know that in the past some of those kids that necessarily couldn't get the services at one of our schools would go somewhere else. And so now they have some of those, what they would call self-contained classrooms in the district, which I think is important. I think inclusion is also really important. Not all the time, but, you know, I have a really beautiful story about my son. So Jameson was in the special ed regular ed class a couple times, and so he was in first grade, and he had a little friend who had autism, and that was his first experience with autism when he was 6 years old. You know, and he'd come home and he'd talk to me about it. You know, my friend, you know, she's a little. You know, we'd talk about, well, how could you play with her, and they became, you know, pretty good friends. And Jameson went to her birthday party, and then it came time for Jameson's birthday party. His birthday is in the summer, and we have a little boy at our church who has Down syndrome, and maybe he's a year older than Jameson. And it was going to be an all-boy birthday party, and so we were going through the list of friends he wanted to invite, and he said, I want to invite Stanley. And I said, you do? That's wonderful. And so we were talking, and I just asked him, I said, you know, just tell me a little bit about that. And he said, well, he goes, you know, that he's a lot like my friend at school. And you know, I really had fun at her birthday party, and so I just really want him to be at my birthday party. And I said, that's great. So I called his mom, and his mom said, she said, and it makes me cry a little bit. She said, this is the first time that he's ever been invited to a birthday, you know? And so I think that those opportunities for inclusion in the classroom allow our children to experience diversity as far as among disabilities. And they can grow and develop compassion and empathy and an understanding on how to be friends with somebody that's very different from them. And I think they get that at Carbondale Elementary School, which is a beautiful thing, you know. So they have opportunity with ethnic and racial diversity, and then also with disability, and the potential then when they're exposed to those different types of kids in the classroom, not just on the playground or at lunch, but actually in the classroom. Then at 4th and 5th and 6th grade on into high school, they're compassionate and caring, and they take those kids along with them, And I don't know that if they don't have those opportunities when they're little, I think that's less likely to happen when they're older, And
that rolls up into adulthood just the same.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're talking about a young person who has gotten to directly engage with somebody who may not have full use of their legs, they may not have full cognitive function, they may be on the spectrum, that when these young folks grow up to be adults, that they now have had a lifelong relationship with individuals who policy needs to be made for, and now you have an adult that says, "Oh, I've had engagements and relationships and folks in this way in my life for this long. I've observed and been part of it at all different stages. Now we can do the next stage of making the world a little bit
those
better.
changes.
Now all of a sudden your son's running for school board and he's
Yeah,
doing
right.
good things,
Yeah.
right? But I mean that's a very real consequence, right? Long term,
Right.
of
You're
just
right.
good old human interaction, and to move beyond institutional exclusion.
Right. Yeah. And when you think about disability, there are different theories of disability and different models, and one of them is the social model, and the idea that a disability is only a disability as so far as the societal constructs make it so.
Yep.
Right? So if you can change the societal constructs so that person can access the quality of life that they want, the job that they want, then their disability is no longer a disability.
Yep.
And I think that's sort of what you're saying, that as our children grow and learn to accept varying disabilities, then they move on to be adults that can continue to change that construct.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think you got it right on the head. That it is that we allow as much as we want to, right? As a whole, in the way that, again, we work through the political system to determine who we do and who we don't, provide or assign value to, and who we do through the actual actions that we take, right? The sidewalks in Carbondale are an example of that, right?
Finally, right?
Some parts of the sidewalks, are accessible and built in such a way to provide the guidance that anybody needs, from somebody who may be in a wheelchair to somebody who may be blind, right? That there's just all sorts of functionality in that. But on the other side of it, right, it's not that way in all communities, and even in our community, there are plenty of places where there are disparities there. I mean, it's the up and down of it. As much as you can do one good thing here, there are 20 other things that need fixed over here, and that's part of the, again, we go back to the not having a platform component of this, right? Until you are doing the job, it's difficult to just outright prioritize, as you're kind of giving your spiel on the campaign trail.
That's true. Yeah. And Sean and I were talking about this the other night. I read this really interesting article about the school board and school board elections and why they're so important. And people, I think community members, we don't think about the school board. We don't pay it a lot of attention. Yeah. And yet, after I read this article, it was so wow, mind-blowing to me, this idea that the school board is almost like the foundation to our society, to our government, in that it's like one of the lowest level areas that you can vote for. And your vote is so important, and thinking about, somebody would say, well, I don't have kids, So why should I take the time to vet the school board candidates when it doesn't impact me? But it does. Because, I mean, you can make a couple of different arguments there. You can talk about how our children are important, regardless of whether you have children or not, because they, you know, they are going to grow up to be adults, and we need to care for them. And we need to provide all the children in our community with an equitable education, you know. But you can also talk to people about the fact that it impacts your property value, because great school districts, people want to live in great school districts. And so your property value is tied to the school board, because the school board are the people that make a lot of the, you know, important decisions and are the they steer the school where it's going to go. And so, you know, I hope that the people that are listening to this, you know, that maybe hadn't considered really looking at the school board to really think about it, because it's important. And municipal elections in general, you know, city elections, a lot of people, you know, the vote turnout is so much lower, you know, and yet you could argue that it's more important than the national elections, because while it's very important that you choose your representatives, your congressmen, senators, you know, president, that's all really important. But what really happens to you at a local level is what you really feel, you know. So there. Now I'll get off my soapbox about
let
voting.
Let it out. No, it's so fun. I hadn't until you started talking about it in this context of juxtaposition of you know top of the ballot candidates and down ballot candidates and you know and actual federal election or municipal elections. In my mind, it just clicked over on people who argue about, well, why do you go through the drive-thru at McDonald's so much when you've got you know, such and such local restaurant over here that, you know, where are you spending your dollars at just the same when your dollars roll up into larger corporations, and then you go, man, these folks are taking resources out of our community, while at the same time you know, not looking at again, the local organizations. Is very much the same thing in national and local politics. A lot of care over here for national politics because it's the convenient politics to engage in almost.
Yeah, it's exciting, and there's a lot, you know, there's a lot of news around it, and a lot of money put into it. You know?
And it's easy to pick one side or the other or wherever you may be.
Yeah.
In local politics, it's not as easy, because you really know the people that you're here, and you can have agreeances with them 60% of the time, and 40% of the time you don't agree with them. But still, again, like we went back to the start of the conversation, still really like that person, be friends with them, and oh no, now you're torn with all of this political activity around you. Where do I go? What direction am I headed with? You know, I get that.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely at the municipal level, political party, I don't think it's necessarily as important as it, you know, I think definitely at that local level, it's, you know, it's really voting for, you know,
it's a person.
Yeah, you know, and voting for someone who you think is going to do a great job. Yeah. You know, it's not always left or right or, you know, center. It's I don't know. That's another conversation. But
well, one of the things I want to jump back into, you touched on it a little bit. It was coming to Carbondale, right? And that's really you have command over your story in the way that you're able to present yourself in long form conversation. So that's stellar. Like, I didn't even have to ask questions. You're just like, I got this. Let's go.
I like to talk.
But that's usually where we kind of jump off to, is ask people, well, how did you come to be in Carbondale? And you said your parents moved here from Anna, but I'm guessing they weren't originally from Anna either.
No, my parents. So my parents moved. My dad's from Anna.
Okay.
So my grandfather owned a grocery store in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in Anna. And my dad and my mom met. My mom came down here, I think it was called Anna State Hospital back then, and did her nursing rotation there. And my mom and dad met that way. Okay. And then they moved to Chicago. And that I grew up in Chicago, half of my childhood there, and then we moved to California, spent the other half of my childhood there. And then my parents, I got my bachelor's at Cal State Fullerton, and when I was a senior, my parents moved here. So they started Kite Hill Bed and Breakfast and cultivated that the vineyard and the winery, and they sold it, gosh, maybe, I don't know, several years ago. So that's how they ended up here. Yeah, and then, like I said, I got suckered into a blind date with the best guy ever, and that I didn't know. Yeah, he didn't want to meet me. I didn't want to meet him, like I said, but it was almost love at first sight, I would say, and here we are, in Carbondale. It's so, life is, if you had told me when I was living in LA that I would be spending, I've lived in Carbondale longer than I've lived anywhere. That I would spend my life in Carbondale, Illinois, I would say, you are absolutely out of your mind. But now, I can't imagine really raising my kids anywhere else. It's such a beautiful community. Just the natural resources we have, all the just outdoor experiences, and then with the university, there's a lot of neat cultural experiences that Carbondale has to offer, and then we've got such great diversity. I think we're really a very unique city. We've got music, so much music. We've got art, just a great wealth of wonderful artists in the community. Just about anything you want, you can find and do here, which is so neat, given it is in rural America. Yeah. And that's also what's so fun. Like my son Jameson, one of his best buds is a farmer, and he's got another best bud, dad is a doctor, and then he's got another best bud whose dad is a professor, and it's just like so many different people that he is able to be friends with, and that's really exciting.
Perspective, right?
Yeah, and different perspectives.
I would imagine, coming from the coast, having lived in LA, that there are folks that you would encounter that seem like they have this life experience kind of cornered, that it kind of belongs to them, that if you're not LA living, you're not living.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, no, there's actually some really cool aspects of this, and that can be said for a lot of folks in a lot of cities, right? Chicago, New York, Houston, wherever you may be, that there are folks being like, nah, this is it. But it's like, oh no, surprise! You can actually have a microcosm of all these things that make up experiences in a large area, in an urbanized area that actually exists here in rural America. Yeah, and we just happen to be just close enough for all these things to coincide all together all at once.
Right? Yeah, not too far away. It's funny, people just don't realize that that there is even Illinois down here. When I'll tell people, they'll say, where do you live? And, near Peoria or up near. I said, no. I said, we're about an hour from Kentucky. Illinois goes down that far. Like,
yes.
Yep.
Yes, it does. Yes,
it
does. So there was always some sort of Southern Illinois roots, but you didn't really experience the Southern Illinois roots until you were grown.
Yeah, and I worked for about 4 years in the nursing home in Anna, which was even more of a trip for me because given that my parents are elderly, I was treating patients who knew my dad, who went to school with my dad,
Wow.
you know, and they would, you know, tell me stories about my dad and or my grandfather, and that was a really unique experience that I just you know, never would have thought I would have had.
Yeah.
Really, really fun.
And it is a 180 from having a life again and away from where your family is from, where you wouldn't have had these stories. It would have just been this long disconnect, and now it would have almost started over from scratch, where you would have been like, oh, this is a new family identity from here now that we're the LA family,
right?
As opposed to the Southern Illinois family.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a unique perspective. So here's a selfish question for me, because I'm interested in getting people to move here from places like where in California wildfires have wiped out entire towns. I mean, having had an experience growing up part of your life in California, do you think this is the place that we could actually attract people from there to here and have like a reasonable sales pitch to do so?
I think so. You know, I think it's definitely a different pace of living, which was hard for me at first, much slower, I would say. I think what I miss the most is the food, you know, different options, although it's a lot better here now than it was when I first moved here. We have a lot of really unique restaurants that have kind of opened up and offer that variety. But yeah, I think Carbondale is a great place to move and raise your family. And it's exciting for me to see people, you know, I have friends who are, you know, through church that, you know, grew up here and then they left and now they're back, you know, and they've chosen to come back and they're choosing to be here. And it seems like there's a movement among people our age to really get back involved in the community and to work to make our communities stronger. And that's where, you know, everything starts, is grassroots efforts, you know, people who care about other people and want to make a change. And so it's fun to see how different people are doing that, you know. And I'm excited, and I hope that Carbondale will come out on April 6th to vote and, you know, cast their ballot for me so I can start down my path of, you know, giving back to the community in this more specific way.
Your sign game has been good. I will, you know, I'm gonna have an interview with Marquita on Friday, and I'm gonna joke with her a little bit. She was the first person to have a sign out. She was the only person to have a sign out before me, and I know that because the first sign that I went to put out, I put it in a yard next to a yard that had her sign out. I was like, dang. But at the same time, I've also, you know, as this is all going on, see a bunch of yours popping up around town, and it's, you know, it's just interesting to even put your name on a billboard and like little billboards and walk around and put them all over town and be like, my name's around town now.
It's an experience. It's an experience. I was at a store and I paid with my credit card, and the cashier looked at me and he said, Erin Connelly, your name really familiar. Isn't your name on signs all over? And he said, maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was Eric Connelly. And I said, no, it's Erin Connelly. That's me.
It's me. And then there's the other side of that where you know, where people who should be well known around town can walk into a store or a place and nobody has a clue. It just depends on the time of day. And it's so it's an interesting I don't even know what the right phrase here is. Just action to take, again, to like try and become notable in like a short amount of time, like for a very specific reason, and then nobody cares again for another however long until you have to do it again.
Nobody remembers you. Yeah. Very short notoriety, which is okay. You know.
Have you started like walking and putting door hangers out? That's what spurred me. Really, I had been thinking about this, and the thing that really turned me over on this was two things. One, a post that I had seen about Corey, and then Sean's post with your door hangers.
Yeah.
On them, I was like, all right, it's go do the District 95 thing. This is a thing.
Good. Well, I'm glad that kind of spurred you on to talk to us, because that's great. I think this is a great service that you're providing, again, to just allow the community to get to know the candidates a little more. And yeah, I'm starting to walk around the neighborhoods, and I'm having some, I've asked some friends that live in different neighborhoods to walk their neighborhoods for me. Yeah. It's different with COVID because, whether I would really like to meet people, because, that's, I like to know people. I want to say, hey, I'm Erin, but at the same time, it's so awkward, and like, I've had my vaccination. But, so I'm talking to people if they're out in their yard, I might just say, hey. Yeah. But other than that, I'm just hanging the door knockers and not, knocking on people's doors and asking them to open their doors. But, yeah, I think that's hopefully another great way just to get my name out there, and a quick blurb about, me and my experience and why I want to do this.
Yeah. No, it's and I really did when starting this up, right, starting on city council, and had I not gotten COVID in January, I would have been a little bit more ahead of the game on this, but that was my New Year's Eve present for my life.
Right before the vaccination, we had COVID in November, and and it's just such a bummer to get it right before you could get vaccinated.
Yep. And we rolled right in, because I'm 1B, so I rolled right in, and so is my wife. We rolled right in from having had COVID to, okay, it's literally day one of being able to get the vaccine.
We're out of quarantine.
It's just wacky. But I mean, that's my hope. What my hope was to get these kind of in process to before all of the forms, that people would have had a time to like watch these and digest them, and then be like, okay, cool, it's been a month, and now I'm gonna listen to this person's like spiel now that I've learned about them as a person. But didn't work out quite like that. But I really, like I said, I'm appreciative of the social media activity that y'all have done as school board candidates so far to just draw some attention to it, which drew me to it, which hopefully draws more attention to it.
Yeah, good.
Especially so. as on the other side of this, where people that may be interested in the John A. Logan race or the city council race or what have you aren't as engaged on the school board race. That's the other thing, right? Like, how do you follow all of these different things going on? Like, it's tough enough to manage trying to watch one, let alone, hey, there are still people that you need to be concerned about on your school board. There are still people that are a trustee, or they are the college. Wacky.
Yeah, I sure I knew this, or I don't know. This first time I've really noticed the John A. Logan signs and thinking, we get to vote for that. That was kind of a new thought to me. It is a lot. And it's hard to carve out time sometimes to take a look at all of it. I know sometimes I walk into the ballot box and I'm like, oh, darn it, I forgot to look at those judges, or,
right.
It's like, real. But civic duty, again, it's our right to vote is so precious. And so many people think my vote doesn't matter, and nationally, while I think our vote does matter, I can understand how people would feel that way. But locally, your vote really matters. Yes. Because it's not that many votes. And so, when you do your due diligence, excuse me, and you figure out who you want to vote for and you cast your vote, it matters. Yeah. Big time. And it's exciting when you think about it that way to be able to exercise your right to vote.
getting old enough to start bubbling in next to the names of people that I actually know.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I feel like that's a disconnect for folks who are younger, like just becoming of age to vote. And I think arguably that's even a little different with Gen Z now than it was for our generations to engage in this. That they're a little bit more politically savvy this go around, but otherwise it was usually, I don't know these people, I'm not connected to these people. Why do I worry about it? And it's like, okay, well, as you start to understand that there are people that you know on this ballot, now all of a sudden as an adult, you're like, haha, I got to participate.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And even at that, 13% of registered voters in the city, I think was the last election in this cycle. I mean, 1,300 people tops.
Yeah. I know. Well, maybe that'll change slowly. Who knows? Yeah.
I didn't mean to get all like bummery.
Yeah, it's it's.
I do that sometimes, and I just got to figure out. Oh no, don't steer out of the skid, Nathan. Why'd you have to? It's been 50 minutes of really good conversation. Don't go ruining it now. Oh shucks, what for healthcare? Because both you and Sean work in healthcare, right? And has that always been the case? Has he always been in healthcare as well, or is his?
No, when I met him, he worked for the Southern Illinoisan.
Okay.
And he was in
Well
advertising. And then he, I'm sure Sean's really kind of a beer geek kind of guy, loves craft beer. And so then he went and worked in the beer industry for a while. I think he just kind of got burnt out doing that. And then this opportunity opened up for him over at SIH, and he really loves it. I think it's a fun way to market because it's not that I hate to make it sound like all marketing isn't meaningful, but when you're marketing,
I will be the first. I will tell you as a marketer, as a in the same line of profession. Not all marketing is valuable. Not all marketing matters. A lot of marketing is just garbage to get people to transact. So,
yeah, right. Yeah, I can see that.
I'll provide you the cover.
Yeah, and so I think he's really enjoying, marketing these programs that SIH offers to the community and getting that voice out there, about, whether it's stroke awareness or heart awareness. And I think it might be 4 or 5 years, maybe 5 years now. He's worked there, so.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he really loves it. And I have really enjoyed my transition to working for SIU. It's been a lot of fun. It's like a different helping to build someone else's clinical skills, helping them to grow and develop their professional disposition. It's exciting in a way that I didn't expect it to be. It's like a new challenge. A different challenge than what I did before. And sometimes I do miss direct treatment. I was working PRN in nursing homes, sometimes in the evening or on the weekends until Corona, and then I had to stop. So now I'm not working in the private sector at all. But that, in some ways that's good because it's allowed me to slow down a little bit. I think COVID did that for all of us. It made us really slow our lifestyle down a lot. I think it's, and I think I also understand some aspects of education that I didn't before, which has been fun too. And now that I'm starting some research related to my dissertation, which really excites me, like I always wanted to go back and get my PhD. And I just never thought I would be like geeking out on research the way that I am. Like it's so fun.
Yeah.
It's funny to say that research is so fun, but it is, it's almost like I tell people, it's like, kind of like I'm a kid in a candy store. I'm just so excited by it. So I think part of it is it's just a dream that I thought was not going to happen. You know, I put it away maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I just kind of tucked that away. Like, no, that's just not in my future. And so to be able to bring that back and resurface that and to see, you know, that dream come into reality is really exciting for me.
Oh, it is fulfilling to hear you talk about it. It really is, right? And it's because there are folks that slug through it and struggle. There are folks that just do it because it's what they have to do for the next step. But it is very refreshing when you hear somebody that really is just into it.
Yeah. And I'm getting my PhD in rehabilitation counseling and administration, so it's a different lens than speech pathology. It's a much wider lens on disability. And so it's been really fun because it's not like when I was in grad school and I was having to consume and digest and assimilate all this new knowledge. You know, I have 20 years of experience in rehabilitation, so it's looking at what I already know from a bigger angle and then even some concepts that I probably did learn, but I didn't assimilate them. So understanding some things that I didn't understand before has been just really fun, really fun. And what I always wanted to do back when I graduated with my master's degree, I wanted to get some experience and do real meaningful research.
Yeah.
That for the clinician, for the practitioner. You know, so many times I read research, and like, how did you even do that? I hate to say that, but like, as a practicing clinician, that doesn't help me at all.
Yeah.
So that is my goal, is to help practicing clinicians treat their patients better.
So that ties in back to the school board one more time in terms of there are people that research for research sakes, right? And there are people that research for application sake, right? And to have somebody that's working from a perspective of, you know, I bring in policy and research associated with it for application's sake, not just for the sake of pontification on policy.
Yeah. And they both have their place. I definitely think it's, all research is, for the most part, important research, but, the application piece is critical. And I think something else that's been really fun for me is learning how to take a look at a study and identify whether it's a good one or not.
Yeah.
Because in the past, as a practicing clinician, I kind of went past all that. Like, okay, I'm just going to get past the research methods. Tell me the conclusion, you know? And so now to be able to have that knowledge, just to look at the research methods and say, no. I'm not going to bother to read your conclusion because your research isn't sound. That's a fun, something new for me. I'm still learning. I'm definitely not, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in being able to do that, but it's a fun new skill that I have. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's that is, again, applicable.
Yeah.
Right. The until you get into a role, you can only think of how much some of this work applies to what you can do. But it's, in talking with Kathy, right, part of her explanation of what the school board does is in setting policy for the superintendent to, in turn, work through administrative staff and faculty to execute. Right. And it takes having people that have that understanding of, again, not just up here, but one-to-one, where this is actually going, where a policy is going to fall out on the other side.
Right. Yeah. How is this going to work? Because sometimes things we can think that something will work, but it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
When you put it into practice. And I think that more and more as this is probably a different topic, but as children that are growing and learning, they do a lot of their work in a computer on theoretical knowledge, but they've never actually built something to know that, yeah, even though theoretically that's going to work, realistically it won't, you know? And I think that's, that's really interesting, that idea of, yeah, sometimes you have to be able to, be able to tell, the difference between what could work in theory, or even, okay, this is a great theory. How do we pull the theory and make it practical for us?
Yeah.
And that's where some of that, going back to that evidence-based practice, where you take the research, but you also look at the client perspectives, and I think in terms of school board, you're looking at, well, there's a lot of perspectives that we have to take into account. We've got the teacher's perspectives, we have the parent perspectives, we have the children and their perspectives, and the community's perspectives, and those are all really important pieces that the school board, and then the school board members have their perspectives. And I think when you can take all of that together, you can find a way that's going to, bring that theory into a meaningful practice for our school, But if you just look at one, if you're only looking at these perspectives, it's not going to work. Or if you're only looking at theory, it's not going to work. Or if the school board's only looking at what, it's almost like I tell my students, you have to take your speech therapy blinders off. You can't just be looking like this all the time, because there's a whole lot of other things happening around you. And if you're looking at your client like this, you're missing the boat completely, And then you're wondering why your therapy's not working. Well, there's all these other things happening in this person's life, that are confounding whatever reason your therapy's not working. So, yeah, I don't know.
No, but you do, and that's spot on. I mean, ultimately, what it comes to is everybody's experience is similar enough to make reference to, but different enough to understand that whatever you apply is going to be just different enough that it's going to have to be just different enough to work specifically for that person or that environment or that organization or what have you.
And having that, cultural responsiveness is so important. And it starts with each individual person, and I think being aware of my bias, because we all have bias. There's not a single person that doesn't. And I think when you can step in and say, okay, maybe I've got a bias happening here. I'm aware of it. What can I do to work with it? Can I set it down? Do I just need to pay attention to it? And then also that in turn, when you start to understand your bias, then you can really start to see other people and value them, because everybody lives very different experiences, and one experience isn't better than another. It's just different. And that's, again, if we go back to Carbondale, gosh, that's another reason why I love to have my kids there. I think I've said this already, but gosh, just the diversity that my kids, they get to be friends with people that are very different from them, and that is really exciting, and I think it's also important for children to experience life while they're under their parents' roof, so that if they see something that's unusual at school or different or, a little scary or who knows what it is, they can come home and we can have a conversation about it, and we can talk about it, and then they can grow and develop, and they can take bits and pieces of different culture and assimilate it into who they are, and it's a really can be a really just beautiful opportunity for children, when we can really help them to respect and love each other's differences. It's what That's what makes us unique, you know. We're all different, and that's great. You know, we can respect each other's differences.
And that is what has been great about episode 45 of the WTF Carbondale podcast. Sorry, I always try and find that like break-in line where
perfect.
I like lean in and out, and I try and find that very like last word that ties into where this was.
Yeah.
Had we ended like 2 minutes earlier perspective, I was going to be like, and that's the perspective from Erin Connelly for episode 45 of the WTF Carbondale podcast. Erin is running for District 95 school board, and she's part of this little impromptu series of interviews with some of the candidates that are running from school board this year. Other than that, as I always say, have a good one, whatever that one may be.